Hey everyone, good morning. Hope you had a great weekend and you're able to get outside and enjoy a little bit of sunshine and just kind of stretch your legs while we're still doing this remote learning from home. Today, I wanted to talk to you about another reading strategy that we've covered a bit in class. And I'm just going to give you two reminders of how to do that, and that is retelling across your fingers. Sometimes when we're reading books, it's not just a matter of getting through the whole book and realizing we understood every word, but it's about trying to remember what we read. Because if we read to the end of a book and then if we can't really remember what it's about, it's kind of like, oh, that was a lot of work and it took a lot of time. And so it really might not be as fulfilling or enjoyable if you get to the end of a book and you don't really remember what it's about. I'm going to show you how you can retell across your fingers, and that'll help you kind of keep track as you're reading. And it depends on the kind of book you have. You may want to read it at the end of the book if it's a short book. You may want to retell across your fingers if it is a chapter book, and maybe you want to do it after each chapter or even in the middle of a chapter. So I have two books here. One is a book called Pi, which a friend of mine wrote, Sarah Weeks. And this is a chapter book. It's a bigger chapter book for maybe about third grade and up. And I was looking at chapter one, and it's about 10 pages long. And so I was thinking, and every couple of pages they have these kind of like pause dots where I think they're going to change a little bit of what's happening, like kind of the flow or the narrative of who's telling the story. And so I did a walk, a picture walk maybe, but just to get a sense of how long the chapter is. So page one, page two, and there's a lot of words on each page in each chapter. Page three, four. Here we go, page 6 and 7, and I see some dots here. I'm just going to keep going. And page 10. So page 1 through 10 is chapter 1. I could do two things. One, I could read the whole chapter, the 10 pages, and then retell across my fingers for those 10 pages. But I think to start and practice, I'm going to just do up to the first 5 or 6 pages. And I think those dots that I found here on halfway through page 7 is where I might stop and check in with myself. And then if I know what's going on, I will keep going and finish the chapter and then do it again. If I get to this part and I can't really retell across my fingers what's happening so far, good readers reread. So then I'll go back to the beginning, reread, try again. If I can do it successfully, then I'll read the rest. It's only like 2.5, 3 pages, 1, 2, 3, 3.5 pages. And then I do it again. Because if I don't understand what I'm reading, it doesn't make sense to keep going. So it's okay. You're stopping. We're checking in with each other. Yeah, I see some dots at the top. That's okay. this is a short paragraph. I would just keep reading. I'm not going to use this book right now. I'm going to use a smaller book, a book we've done before called Big Brother. And it's just going to be easier for me to demonstrate the two ways that you can retell across your fingers. One way we can retell across our fingers is using first, next, then, after, finally. Again, that's first, next, then, after, finally. Okay? So we're just telling the highlights. We're not telling the whole story. The second way, and it may be a little bit easier for you, will be your thumb is your setting, index finger is characters, then the beginning, the middle, and the end. Again, that's setting, characters, beginning, middle, end. Okay? The setting is where and when the story takes place. The characters are who's mostly in the story that we're reading about as we go along. It doesn't have to be every single character, but the main characters, maybe 1 or 2 secondary if they're really important. The big idea about the beginning, the big idea about the middle, the big idea about the end. And it could be just from the beginning to the end of the pages I've read, or that chapter. It doesn't have to be the whole book. Big Brother. We did this with our other internal and external traits, characteristics, and so I like to go back and use the same book. Big Brother by Charlotte Zolotow, pictures by Mary Chalmers. Once there was a little sister and a big brother who liked to tease her. He pretended to put tacks in her bed, and she cried. But he didn't put tacks in her bed at all. He pretended to eat her candy. We can also call it somewhat of a predictable text a little bit. And she cried, but he didn't really eat her candy at all. He pretended he thought she had 3 eyes, and she cried. But he didn't think she has 3 eyes at all. He pretended to break an egg in her hair, and she cried. But he didn't break an egg in her hair at all. He pretended to pick all the flowers in her part of the garden, and she cried. But he didn't pick any flowers at all. One day, the little girl, was busy. She was coloring a picture of the moon and the stars and a bird at night. Her brother pretended to lock her in her room, but she looked up and saw he hadn't locked her in her room at all. So she didn't cry. He pretended to throw her doll out the window, but she watched and she saw he didn't really throw her doll out. So she didn't cry. He pretended to call a rattlesnake to bite her, but she didn't see any rattlesnake. So she didn't cry, and she finished coloring her picture. "What are you doing?" her brother asked. "I have just finished making the night with stars and a bird," she said. "Do you want to look?" He wanted to look. "I'll make the night too," he said. "I used up all the black crayon," the little sister said, "but you could make day with light blue and yellow for the sun." So he sat down on the floor next to his sister, and they both colored all afternoon. Before they knew it, it was dark, and they had lemon meringue pie for dinner. So I'm going to retell this story 2 ways. First, I'll start with the first, next, then, after, finally. First, we saw that there was a boy and a girl who lived together, brother and sister. Next, the brother kept teasing the little girl by saying that he was going to crack an egg in her hair, for example. After that, he pretended to eat her candy. Then he picked flowers in her part of the garden. Actually, you know what? I'm going to retell this because what I'm doing is I'm retelling every little thing that happened, and I'm running out of fingers. And so I want to make sure you are able to read the book. So I'm going to start again. First, we were introduced to a little brother and sister. Next, we found out that the brother likes to tease her about a lot of things every day, and she cries. Then the little girl realizes that he's just trying to trick her, and so she doesn't cry. After that, he loses interest in teasing her and is interested in what she's doing. And finally, he decides to draw with her, and they have a good time after all, and they get along. So I think that's more of a clear retell. First, we found out that there's a brother and sister. Next, we found out that the brother likes to tease her all the time and make her cry. First, next, then, after a while, she realizes that he is just teasing her and that she doesn't need to worry because he's not really doing these things, and so she doesn't cry. After that, he realizes that she's doing some cool stuff, and he wants to join her by maybe coloring. And finally, they color together and enjoy some lemon meringue pie for dinner. Another way I could retell my story is by saying the setting. Well, our story takes place inside a house. Our characters are the big brother and little sister. In the beginning, the big brother does many things to make his little sister cry, and she does. In the middle, she realizes that he's not really doing things and he's just teasing her, so she grows up a little bit and decides not to cry. And then finally, he decides that he wants to take interest in what she's doing, and they get along and they color together, and he doesn't tease her anymore. Okay? So when you're reading your book today, think about stopping every couple of pages, stopping maybe at the end of a chapter, or if it is at the end of the book, and retelling across your fingers. If you have a hard time retelling across your fingers, go back and reread. It's really going to help you as you're growing as a reader and as your books get longer or your chapters get bigger, that you stop every maybe 3 pages, then try every 5 pages, then try every 7 pages or every 10 pages. You can work your way up as you're reading. There's 2 ways to retell across your fingers. First, next, then, after, finally, or setting, characters, beginning, middle, and end. Go ahead, read today a little bit, and then give it a go. Try it out. Try one way, try both ways. And then I challenge you to teach this way to your grown-ups. Maybe if you have family reading time, you can all come together. When you're done reading, you all go around the circle and retell across your fingers what each of you read in your own reading books. I hope you enjoy, and off you pop.